They slept warm without heat, the forgotten bed insulation trick that beat freezing nights. Cold rooms, no heaters, no electricity, and still, people slept through brutal winters without turning into ice. That's not luck, that's strategy. And today, we're breaking down one of the most overlooked survival systems ever used, an old bed insulation layout so effective it kept people alive even during the harsh conditions of World War II. This isn't just history, this is a blueprint you can use. Let's get into it. The real enemy wasn't the cold air. Most people think staying warm is about heating the room. That's the mistake. The real enemy is heat loss from your body. Once your body heat escapes, no blanket can save you. People in the past understood something simple but powerful. You don't need to heat the whole room, you just need to trap your heat. And they built their beds like insulation systems. Layering wasn't random, it was tactical. The old setup followed a strict structure. Every layer had a job, not style, not comfort, survival. At the bottom, they avoided direct contact with the ground or cold floor. Beds were raised when possible. Even a few inches made a difference. If not, they used thick base layers, straw, rugs, or folded cloth to block the cold seeping upward. Then came the mattress, but not the soft kind you're thinking about. These were often stuffed with natural materials like straw, wool, or feathers. Why? Because they trap air, and trapped air is insulation. Now, here's where it gets clever. Instead of just piling blankets on top, they used a sandwich method. A base layer under the sleeper, a thick insulating layer above, and sometimes even side barriers. You weren't just lying in a bed, you were inside a heat pocket. Blankets worked better when they were compressed. Here's a detail most people miss. Heavy blankets weren't just thrown on loosely, they were tucked in tight. Why? Because loose blankets let warm air escape. Tightly tucked blankets create a sealed environment. Your body heats the air inside that space, and the heat stays there. This is the same principle used in modern sleeping bags. In fact, many soldiers during World War II relied on similar techniques when proper heating wasn't available. Tight layers, minimal air gaps, maximum heat retention. The top layer was everything. The top layer wasn't just for warmth. It was the shield. Wool was the king material. It stayed warm even when damp, you know. It blocked drafts. And it held heat better than most fabrics available at the time. If wool wasn't available, people layered multiple fabrics. Linen, cotton, anything they had. The goal wasn't luxury. It was thickness and density. And sometimes they added one more trick. A final outer cover, something heavier, something that blocked airflow completely. This turned the entire bed into a sealed system. They reduced exposure, not just added layers. Another smart move, honestly. They minimized exposed skin. Head, neck and feet were priority zones. Heat escapes fast from these areas, you know, so they covered them deliberately. Caps were worn to bed. Socks stayed on. Scarves or cloth wraps protected the neck. It might sound uncomfortable today, but it worked. Because once your core temperature stays stable, your whole body follows. Bed curtains weren't decoration. You've probably seen old beds with curtains around them. That wasn't style. That was insulation engineering. These curtains trapped heat around the bed, creating a microclimate. Even in freezing rooms, the inside of those curtains stayed significantly warmer. Think of it as a room within a room. This technique was especially common in colder regions and during times when fuel was scarce, including the harsh years of World War II, when heating resources were limited or rationed. People adapted, and they adapted smart. Airflow control changed everything. Cold air moving through a room is far worse than still cold air. Drafts steal heat quickly, so they block them. Beds were positioned away from windows and doors. Gaps were sealed with cloth or makeshift barriers. Even small changes made a difference. And once inside the bed setup, airflow was minimized completely. No drafts, no heat loss, just a stable pocket of warmth. Body heat was the primary heat source. Here's the truth. The entire system relied on one thing: your body. Everything else was designed to keep your natural heat from escaping. That's why multiple people sometimes shared a bed. Not just for space, for warmth. More bodies meant more heat, and in a properly insulated setup, that heat stayed trapped. It was efficient, it was practical, and it saved lives. Why this still matters today? You might not be living through World War II, but power outages happen. Heating fails. Cold nights hit harder than expected. And this method still works. You don't need expensive gear. You don't need modern technology. You just need to understand the system. Block the cold from below, trap heat above, seal the space, minimize airflow, cover key areas. That's it. Simple, effective, proven. The forgotten skill worth remembering. We've become used to flipping a switch for warmth, but history tells a different story. People survived brutal conditions with nothing but knowledge and resourcefulness. This bed insulation layout wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, and now it's a forgotten skill, but not anymore. If you found this useful, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who should know this, and make sure you subscribe to Ancient Tactics for more powerful practical knowledge pulled straight from history.